How are you guys doing? Today is Tuesday, July 27th, 2021. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to do a not only elite profile, but a GOAT profile for Max Scherzer. The GOATed starting pitcher for the Washington Nationals turns 37 today, and because of the distinction that I'm making that this is a GOAT profile, I want to emphasize that Max Scherzer is not your typical elite pitcher. He may go down as one of the greatest pitchers to ever really play the game. And just he's continuing to get better and better, and he's showing why even in this season, at the ripe old age of 37, why he causes fear in the batter box every time someone goes up to face him. Nicknamed Mad Max, is originally from Chesterfield, Missouri, and he would initially go and get drafted in the 11th overall in the 2006 MLB draft, being Mizzou's first ever first-round draft pick. He was taken with the 11th overall pick in the 2006 draft. So, of course, already going into Arizona, he was the best the best baseball player to come out of the University of Mizzou, at least as a prospect, after he won the Big 12 Pitcher of the Year in 2005. It would take him a second to eventually get promoted. He would get promoted by the Arizona Diamondbacks in his age 23 season in 2008. And, of course, in that season with Arizona, he would go on to make 7 starts of the 16 appearances that he would make in a season where the Arizona Diamondbacks would finish with an 82-80 record right after making the playoffs the previous season. In his first appearance in the league, he would pitch 56 innings out of the games he pitched, and he would allow only 48 hits in those 56 innings. He finished with an 0-4 record as his ERA sat at about 3.05. Which is a pretty good start to the year, but of course he would not establish himself as a full-time starter until his second season in 2009 and his age 24 season. That year, he would go on to start all 30 of the games that he would play in a season where the Diamondbacks would finish with a 70-92 record, finishing with 12 less wins than the previous season. But regardless, Max Scherzer would finish with a 9-11 record. I believe that's the only time in his MLB career as a starter he's actually pitched a whole season and finished with a losing record. He finished with a 4.12 ERA, pitching 170.1 innings, the first time he'd ever pitched that many innings in a season. He would allow 166 hits in those innings pitched, which is less hits than innings pitched, and he also had 174 strikeouts in those 170 innings, which is the second year in a row he had more strikeouts than innings pitched. But of course, he wasn't recognized by many for what he was doing, and following that season, the Diamondbacks did officially not make the playoffs yet again. But eventually Max Scherzer would become a member of the Detroit Tigers, as he was actually traded in December going into that year. And once going into Detroit, he was already made a full-time starter. In his age 25 season in Detroit in 2010, he would start all 31 of the games that he would play in a season where the Tigers finished with an 81-81 record. In this particular season, Scherzer would finish with a 12-11 record. His first season with Detroit, he would end up having a winning record with a 3.50 ERA. He would pitch 195.2 innings, which then was a career high for him. He allowed 174 hits in those 195 innings with a difference of 21. That was the biggest difference of hits and innings pitched he had. This would be the third season in a row he had less hits than innings pitched. He threw 184 strikeouts. This would be the first time in his career he had less strikeouts than innings pitched. And at the conclusion of the season, like I said, the Tigers didn't make the playoffs, but people were beginning to start to recognize and respect Scherzer for the talent that he was. In 2011, in his age 26 season, his second season with the Tigers, he would start all 33 of the games that he would play in a season where the Tigers would make the playoffs with a 95-67 record after winning the American League Central. They won 14 more games than the previous season. This is the year where Justin Verlander won the Triple Crown, the Cy Young, and the American League MVP. In Scherzer's second season in Detroit, he would finish with a 15-9 record in those 33 games pitched, as he finished with a 4.43 ERA. That is the highest ERA Max Scherzer has ever recorded in a season. He would allow 207 hits in those 195 innings pitched, which is the first time in his career he allowed more hits than innings pitched, and I believe that's the only time in his career the first time The other time was during the lockout season, but of course I'll get to that in due time. He finished with 174 strikeouts in those 195 innings. It's the second season in a row in which he did not finish with more strikeouts than innings pitched. But regardless, once the Tigers made the playoffs, they would end up beating the Yankees in the American League Division Series before losing to the Rangers in the ALCS. This is the year where they would eventually go on to the World Series, and they would eventually lose to the St. Louis Cardinals, to give a little bit more background. But following that season, the Tigers would come back yet again in 2012. In 2012, Scherzer's third season with the team, his age 27 season, he would start all 32 of the games that he would play in a season where the Tigers repeated as the American League Central Division winners. They had won 7 less games in the previous season, but this season everything was feeling all right. The Tigers would have their second MVP in their second straight season, as this is the year that Miguel Cabrera won the MVP after he, I believe, he was close to hitting. I know he did hit the Triple Crown that year as a hitter, which is incredibly impressive. Tigers had 2 consecutive Triple Crown players, but regardless, looking at how Max Scherzer performed, he finished with a 16-7 record along with a 3.74 ERA. This was his best win-loss percentage yet. In the 187 innings he pitched, he allowed 179 hits, which is the 4th time in the first 5 seasons he's allowed less hits than innings pitched. He would strike out 231 batters. This would be the first time he had more than 200 strikeouts in a season. And this would be the 3rd time in his first 5 seasons in which he would finish with more strikeouts than innings pitched. This was Max Scherzer's career before he officially became an all-star. And once he became an all-star, he officially flipped the scripts and kind of changed his career forever. But going back to how the 2012 season ended, the Tigers would beat the Athletics in the first round. They would beat the Yankees in the second round, sweep them in the ALCS, but they would end up getting swept by the Giants in the World Series when, of course, the Giants were on their run. And at the conclusion of that season, like I said, Max Scherzer would completely turn a page where nobody would see him as the same pitcher again. In 2013, in Max Scherzer's age 28 season, his 4th season with Detroit and his 6th season in the league, he would go on to start all 32 of the games that he played in a season where the Tigers would win the American League Central for the 3rd year in a row with a 93-69 record, with 5 more wins than the previous season. In this season, Miguel Cabrera would actually win the MVP for the 2nd year in a row. And instead of Justin Verlander winning the Cy Young this year, the Cy Young would end up going to Max Scherzer in his very first All-Star season. In the 32 games that he pitched, he finished with a 21-3 record, winning 87% of his games. He led the American League in wins, and ever since, he's never put up a season with that many wins before. He would go on to finish with a 2.90 ERA. This is the first time in his career he pitched a full season with an ERA below 3. He pitched 214 innings, the first time in his career he pitched 200 innings in a season. He allowed 152 hits, which is a 62 hit to innings difference, which is ridiculous. He finished with 240 strikeouts, which is the 2nd time in his career he finished with at least 200 strikeouts in a season. This is the most strikeouts he's ever put together in a year as well. Not to mention he led the league in whip, walk/hits per innings pitched, where he allowed .97 runners to get to first per inning pitched, which is just amazing. And then once the season was over, like I said, he would go on to make his first All-Star game, maybe named to the Cy Young team. They would beat the Athletics in the division series before losing to the Red Sox in the ALCS. This would be the year where the Red Sox ended up winning it all for the first time since 2007. This would be their 3rd of the century, just to give a sense of how the Red Sox were doing. But following that season, many people were starting to give Max Scherzer the respect he deserved. In 2014, he would come back with his 5th and final season in Detroit. In 2014, he would start all 33 of the games that he would play in a season where the Tigers would finish with a 90-72 record. This was the 4th straight time that they won the American League Central, and not surprisingly for some, after 2014, the Tigers would not make the playoffs after that. They have not made the playoffs since. But in his age 29 season in 2014, Scherzer would finish with an 18-5 record, which he led the American League in wins for the 2nd year in a row. He would finish with a 3.15 ERA, In the 220 innings that he pitched, the second time he pitched 200 innings, he allowed 196 hits. Yet another season for the first 6 years in the league. There was only one season in which he didn't have less hits than innings pitched. He would pitch 252 strikeouts, which by then was a career high. In the third straight season, he had at least 200 strikeouts, which is virtually unheard of. He would go on to be named an All-Star for the second straight year in a row, and he would finish fifth in a Cy Young race that would end up seeing Corey Kluber from the Cleveland Indians take home the award. But of course, Max Scherzer was a very deserving candidate. At the conclusion of the season, the Tigers would end up losing in the very first round to the Orioles. And 2014 was the season where the San Francisco Giants would end up winning their third championship in 5 years. Following 2014, Max Scherzer would see a change of scenery, and he would eventually go on he would sign a $210 million deal with the Washington Nationals, which of course made sense. Coming into the National League, many people would expect a learning curve, but in his very first season in 2015, facing entirely new batters in his age 30 season, like I said that again, he would go on to start all 33 of the games that he played for the Washington Nationals in a season where they would end up going 83-79, finishing second in the National League East and completely missing the playoffs. In this season, in his first season in Washington, Scherzer finished with a 14-12 record. 12 losses is actually the most losses he's actually put together in a full season, but regardless, he still had a winning record. He finished with a 2.79 ERA, which up until then was his career low. And the second time in his career, he had a sub-3 ERA. He would lead the National League in complete games with 4, and he would lead the National League in shutouts with 3. He pitched 228 innings, which by then was a career high, 228.2 innings. He allowed 176 hits, which is yet another season in which he allowed less hits than innings pitched. He would strike out 276 batters, which by then was a career high, even though he didn't lead the National League yet. And then he would lead the National League in batters faced in his very first season in the National League, to give a sense of he actually played the majority of the season against a whole new set of batters, and he would still be named to the All-Star game in his third season in a row. Of course, being a pitcher to do so on National League and American League teams is, of course, incredibly big. He would also go on to pitch 2 no-hitters in 2015 in his very first season there, just to give a sense of how great Max Scherzer has been pitching. And like I said, at the conclusion of the season, they would miss the playoffs completely. But, of course, Max Scherzer was earning his respect in the National League as well as the American League. He would come back in 2016 in his age 31 season for his second year in Washington. And this is one of the seasons that, of course, would cement him in the history books forever. In 2016, he would start all 34 of the games that he played for the Washington Nationals in a season where they would end up going 95-67. They won 12 more games in the previous season, and they would win the National League East. The last season was the year that Bryce Harper won the MVP, so of course many people did have their eyes on Washington. This year, the award would end up going to Max Scherzer, as he became, if not the only player, one of very few players to win the Cy Young Award as a starting pitcher in the American League and as a starting pitcher in the National League. Because just to think about the different batters that you have to face and the fact that you still have to continue to strike them out is like it's amazing to think that he did this. This is the second year in a row he led the National League in games started. He would finish with a 20-7 record. The second time in his career he had at least 20 wins in a season. He would lead the National League in wins for the first time in his career, but this would be the third time in his career he led his respective league in wins. He's only won 20 games twice in his career. That was the most recent time. He would finish with a 2.96 ERA, which is the second time in the the third time in the 4-year stretch in which he had thrown an ERA sub-3 or a sub-3 ERA. He pitched 228.1 innings pitched. That is the 4th season in a row he threw for 200 innings plus. He would allow 31 home runs. This is the first time in his career he actually allowed the most home runs in the league. Not to mention he struck out 284 batters, which by then was a career high. The 5th time in his career he threw over 200 strikeouts, and this would be the first time he led the National League in strikeouts thrown. And he would have the lowest WHIP in the National League, as he finished with a .968 walks/hits per innings pitched. And he would go on to be named the Cy Young in the National League. He would be named an All-Star for the 4th consecutive year. And he would finish 10th in an NL MVP voting that saw Chris Bryant take it home when he helped the Cubs win the World Series. Once the Nationals made it to the World Series, once they made it to the playoffs, they would end up losing in the very first round to the Dodgers. Not to mention that this is the year that the Dodgers would end up losing to the Cubs when the Cubs won the World Series, like I just said. Following the season in which he won the Cy Young Award in both the National League and the American League, he would come back in 2017 in his age 32 season and win it again. He would go on to start all 31 of the games that he would play in a season where the Nationals finished with a 97-65 record. They won 2 more games in the previous season. Max Scherzer would go on to finish with a 16-6 record. This would be yet another winning record. The 7th straight season with a winning record since he had a losing record his 8th straight season since his losing record in his first full season as a starter in the league. He would go on to finish with 2 complete games, which led the National League. He finished with a 2.51 ERA, the 4th out of 5 seasons in which the 4th time in the previous 5 seasons in which he had an ERA below 3. He pitched 200.2 innings, which would be the 5th season in a row in which he pitched at least 200 innings. He would allow 126 hits in those 200 innings, which of course is a difference of 74 more innings than hits allowed. He would strike out 268 batters, which is 68 more strikeouts than innings pitched. This would be the 2nd year in a row he led the National League in strikeouts. And after, just virtually getting what he was able to do, he was close to the Triple Crown, but he wasn't able to get it. After being named an All-Star for the 5th season in a row and putting up quite possibly one of the greatest half decades in all of baseball, like I said, this would be the 3rd time he won the Cy Young, and he has not won the Cy Young since. Looking at that gap in between his first and last Cy Young in those 5 seasons, he would finish with an 89-33 record, winning 73% of his games. He had a 2.87 ERA over that 5-year stretch, starting 163 of those games, which is virtually a full season in the MLB plus a wild card game. He pitched 1,092 innings, allowing 815 hits, which, of course, big difference by about 270-ish, almost 300. He would strike out 1,320 batters, which is more than 200 more strikeouts than innings pitched. And, of course, 2 Cy Youngs. He would go on to average 10.9 strikeouts per 9 innings, just to give a sense of how dominant that stretch was. You probably will not see a stretch of pitching that dominant. And not to mention, he changed from the American League to the National League. But moving on to what Max Scherzer's career was after that Cy Young stretch, following the 2017 playoffs where they lost to the Cubs for the 2nd year in a row, he would come back to Washington in 2018 for his age 33 season, his 4th season on the team. He would go on to start all 33 of the games that he would play at a season where the Nats finished with an 82-80 record and completely missed the playoffs. He would finish with an 18-7 record alongside a 2.53 ERA, which was yet another season, the 4th in a row and 5th in the previous 6 season in which he finished with an ERA below 3. He would finish with 2 complete games. This would be the 3rd time he would end up leading the National League in complete games. He would throw a shutout as well. He pitched 220 innings, which would end up being the 6th consecutive year he pitched at least 200 innings. The second season in the last 3 in which he led the National League in innings pitched. He allowed 150 hits in 220 innings pitched, which is 70 less hits than innings pitched, and he struck out 300 batters. He struck out 80 more batters than hits allowed. This would be the only time in his career he struck out 300 batters straight up. He also led the National League in batters hit as he hit 12 batters as a pitcher. He also faced the most batters in the National League for the 2nd time in his career. He would be named an All-Star for what would be the 6th time in his career in a row. He would be named 10th in the MVP vote for the 3rd year in a row as he finished. This would be the year that Christian Yelich won the MVP. And he would go on to finish as the runner-up in the Cy Young race, as this year was the year that the Cy Young ended up going to Jacob deGrom, as deGrom had a slightly better season with a 1.70 ERA, just to give a sense of how great and dominant Max Scherzer was. At the conclusion of the season, like I said, the Nats did not make the playoffs, but that, of course, gave Scherzer the opportunity to come back in 2019 for his age 34 season, which probably was the legacy season for him. In the regular season, he would go on to start all 27 of the games that he would play in a season where the Nats finished with a 93-69 record. They finished right behind the Braves in the division as they did clinch the playoffs. In the regular season, Scherzer finished with an 11-7 record with a 2.92 ERA. Fifth season in a row and sixth in the last 5 seasons in which he had an ERA below 3. I don't think you understand how difficult of a. I mean, I understand people do have an understanding of how difficult this feat is, but to do this 6 years straight is, I mean, it's GOAT level. He would pitch 172 innings. This would be the first season since 2012 in which he didn't throw for over 200 innings. He still allowed 144 hits, which is another season in which he allowed less hits than innings pitched. He struck out 243 batters in those 172 games, which is a difference of 71. He would also lead the league in fielding independent pitching, which would be the first time he actually did so. He led the league in strikeouts per 9 innings for the third season in his career as he struck out 12.7 batters per inning. He will be named an All-Star for the 7th year in a row. He finished 22nd in MVP voting, and he would finish 3rd in a Cy Young race that would eventually see Jacob deGrom win it back-to-back, and he also finished behind Hyunjin Ryu of the Dodgers. Once the Nats made the playoffs, however, they would end up beating the Brewers in the National League wildcard game thanks to, I want to say, Juan Soto's hit. They would beat the Dodgers, the National League regular season champs in the National League Division Series. They swept the Cardinals in the National League Championship Series, and they would end up beating the Astros in 7 in the World Series in order to capture their very first World Series as the Washington Nationals and their very first championship as a franchise, as before them the Montreal Expos had not won. And, of course, with Max Scherzer having 3 Cy Youngs from different leagues and, of course, being one of the main contributors for a World Series ring, of course, this would be what defined his legacy and what put him over the top into GOAT status. Even though having 3 Cy Youngs on your own is definitely worthy of that, the fact that he won an MVP is extra icing, extra cherries on the sundae. And this, of course, would lead us to the 2020 season and his age 35 season, which many people are aware was impacted so heavily by the COVID-19 outbreak. It would shorten the MLB season to now. Well, it would go on to shorten the MLB season to 60 games, but it did expand the playoffs to 8 games for each league. In this particular season, Max Scherzer would start 12 games in a season where the Washington Nationals would finish with a 26-34 record. Even in a season with an extended playoff after the World Series, the Nats would miss the playoffs completely. In this shortened season, Max Scherzer would finish with a 5-4 record alongside a 3.74 ERA. Still finished with a winning record, but his 3.74 ERA is the highest that he'd post since 2012, the season before he was officially an All-Star. He would pitch 67 innings. He allowed 70 hits. This would be the only time since 2011 in which he allowed more hits than innings pitched. He would go on to strike out 92 batters in 67 innings pitched. Of course, that never changes. He struck out more batters in innings pitched. And like I said, at the conclusion of the season, the Nats would go on to miss the playoffs. This would go on to be a lost season for the Nationals. And of course, this would get us to where we are now, as Max Scherzer is currently in the midst of his age 36 season, as he now turns 37 in 2021, a season where he's already been named an All-Star. So far, he started all 18 of the games that he's played for a Washington Nationals team that's sitting about 4th in the National League East, 8.5 games behind the division-leading New York Mets. So far, Scherzer has a 7-4 record alongside a 2.83 ERA. If this streak continues, Max Scherzer this could very well be his 6th season, let me count this again. This would be the 8th time. Wait, let me check this one more time. This would be the 7th time in the last 9 seasons in which he finished with a ERA below 3 if he continues to keep up this pace. So far, he's pitched 105 innings in this season this far, allowing 68 hits, which, of course, significantly less hits than innings pitched, and he's striking out 142 batters on the season. And already, like I said, thus far, he was already been named an All-Star for the 8th time in his career, which is an incredible feat considering he was named an All-Star for the first time in his age 28 season, showing that he has most definitely got better with age and that the 30s are definitely not a time where Max Scherzer is going. It is definitely it shows that in the near future, it doesn't look like Max Scherzer is really going to dip from his current production, and of course that leads us to where we are right now. As Max Scherzer turns 37, looking back, he's put together quite possibly one of the greatest pitching careers in baseball history, with one of the most impressive flexes in baseball, winning the Cy Young in 2 different divisions, and not only going to a new division and winning the Cy Young once, he won it twice in a row. And the only reason he didn't win it 3 years in a row is because Jacob deGrom virtually pitched what could possibly be one of the best seasons in baseball history. But of course, with that conclusion, I think that, of course, Max Scherzer should be enjoyed at least until he retires. And he still has some amazing, elite, GOAT level baseball pitching stuff left in him. With that said, I want to thank MLB, ESPN, and of course, Pro Baseball Reference for giving me the stats and figures that I needed to do this episode. If you ever get a chance to watch Max Scherzer, he's wearing number 31 for the Washington Nationals. And of course, I want to wish him a happy 37th birthday. And then last but not least, I want to thank everyone for listening to all 26 minutes of this piece. I hope all is well. And hopefully by this time, next year, by Max Scherzer's 38th birthday, he'll hopefully have more to brag about and more just to geek out about as a sports fan. With that said, I want to thank everyone once again. I hope all is well, and I'll catch you next year, hopefully with another installment of Max Scherzer's GOAT profile. Until then, thanks for listening to my piece. I hope all is well, and peace out. I'll catch you tomorrow.